My name is Clarissa Radford, and last Thanksgiving, my mother spent 20 minutes explaining to her book club friends that I still hadn't found my footing in life, while I was simultaneously coordinating an extraction operation in Bogota through an encrypted phone in her powder room. The cognitive dissonance of my existence has become so routine that I barely register it anymore. I'm 42 years old, and for the past 17 years, I've worked for the Central Intelligence Agency. Not in some glamorous, movie version capacity. I don't seduce foreign diplomats or engage in rooftop parkour. I'm a senior operations officer specializing in counterintelligence in the Western Hemisphere. I've briefed 3 presidents. I have a level 5 security clearance. My decisions have, on at least 4 occasions, prevented significant loss of American life. My family thinks I work at a supermarket. This isn't the setup for some elaborate cover story or deep cover operation. It's simply what happens when you grow up in a family so obsessed with appearances that they literally cannot process information that doesn't fit their narrative. When I joined the agency at 25, I told them I was working, quote, in government administration. My mother heard administrative assistant. My uncle translated this as secretary. By the time it reached my younger cousins, I was apparently filing papers in a dusty basement somewhere. When I corrected them, multiple times I should add, they'd smile indulgently and change the subject. That's nice, dear. As if I were a child insisting I'd seen a unicorn. So eventually, I stopped correcting them. It was easier. My work requires discretion anyway, and my family's willful ignorance provided better operational security than any cover story I could have invented. They literally couldn't compromise what they refused to believe existed. But their ignorance evolved into something more insidious over the years. It became contempt. My family, the Radfords of Chevy Chase, Maryland, are not wealthy, but they perform wealth with the dedication of method actors. My Uncle Gregory is a vice president at a mid-tier insurance company, who introduces himself as being, quote, in corporate leadership. My mother volunteers at a museum and calls it curatorial work. My brother Todd sells luxury cars and has somehow convinced everyone he's in the automotive industry, as if he's designing engines rather than manipulating financing rates. They live in a carefully constructed ecosystem of euphemism and aspiration, where job titles matter more than job functions, and perception is the only currency that counts. I, with my vague government work and my complete lack of interest in explaining myself, became the family embarrassment. It started small. Pointed questions at family dinners. Still with that government thing, Clarissa? My mother's friends asking what I did, and my mother's increasingly creative evasions. Oh, Clarissa's work is very technical, very complicated, hard to explain. The condescension was breathtaking. Here I was, running operations that would never see the light of day, managing assets in 4 countries, and my own mother couldn't bring herself to say she didn't know what I did. She had to imply I was doing something so menial it defied description. 3 years ago, at my father's 65th birthday party, my Uncle Gregory had a few too many scotches and asked, loudly, if I was still pushing papers for the DMV or whatever. The table had laughed. Not cruel laughter. Worse, pitying laughter. The kind you give to someone who's utterly deluded about their own importance. I'd smiled and said, "Something like that, Greg. The paperwork is absolutely killer." The irony was completely lost on him. Last Christmas, my brother Todd got engaged to a woman whose father owns a chain of car dealerships. The engagement party was a catered affair at my mother's house, full of Todd's future in-laws and their country club friends. I'd flown in from Istanbul, not that anyone asked where I'd been. I was jet-lagged, running on 4 hours of sleep, and handling a minor crisis via encrypted messages in my mother's guest room. When I finally came downstairs, my mother intercepted me in the hallway. "Clarissa, when Todd's fiance's parents ask what you do, could you maybe, I don't know, make it sound a bit more substantial?" I stared at her. More substantial? You know what I mean. Everyone else has such impressive careers. Todd's in automotive sales, your cousin Meredith is in marketing. Meredith sells leggings on Instagram, Mom. She's a social media entrepreneur. My mother corrected sharply. She has over 50,000 followers. I'll try to make my government work sound more Instagram-worthy, I said. She looked relieved, completely missing the sarcasm. At the party, I'd endured an hour of condescending small talk from Todd's future father-in-law, who kept asking me where I saw myself in 5 years, and whether I'd ever considered getting some real qualifications. I'd smiled and nodded, and thought about the fact that I'd spent the previous week debriefing a high-value asset who'd provided intelligence that would reshape our understanding of cartel operations in Central America. But sure, I should definitely get an MBA so I could impress a car dealership owner from McLean. The breaking point should have come a dozen times, but the actual breaking point came 3 weeks ago, over something so trivial I almost laughed. My nephew, Todd's first child with his new wife, was being christened. It was a big production, naturally. The Radfords don't do small events. They'd rented out the fellowship hall at St. Margaret's Episcopal, hired caterers, invited half of Montgomery County. I'd requested the time off weeks in advance, which, given my position, requires routing through multiple approval channels. I'd had to shuffle 2 scheduled briefings and reroute a status meeting. The bureaucracy of taking a Sunday off when you're a senior operations officer is almost comical. But he was my nephew, and despite everything, I still harbored some naive hope that family meant something. The christening itself was lovely. Baby Christopher screamed through most of it, which I found oddly comforting. At least someone was being honest about their feelings. Afterward, everyone gathered in the fellowship hall. There was champagne, absurdly expensive catering, and the kind of forced networking that my family mistakes for genuine connection. Todd's in-laws held court at one end of the room. My mother fluttered around like an anxious bird, making sure everyone knew everyone else, orchestrating social connections like a air traffic controller. I found a quiet corner near the dessert table and was attempting to eat a piece of cake in peace when my Uncle Gregory found me. Clarissa, hiding back here? Just enjoying the cake, Greg. It's excellent. You should be networking. Todd's father-in-law owns 6 dealerships. 6! Do you know what kind of connections that represents? I'm sure they're very impressive connections, I said. You could learn a lot from Todd, you know. He's really made something of himself. Started from the bottom, worked his way up. Todd's first job was at a dealership your college roommate owned, Greg. His expression soured. The point is, he had ambition, he had drive. He didn't just settle. The word hung in the air between us. Settle. Right, I said. Unlike me. I'm not saying that. You literally just said that. He shifted uncomfortably. Look, I'm just saying, you're 42 years old, Clarissa. You're not getting any younger. Don't you want more for yourself? A real career? Some respect? I took a long sip of champagne. Define real career, Greg. You know what I mean. Something with prospects, growth potential, something you can tell people about without them looking confused. Maybe they're confused because they're not very bright, Greg. Has that occurred to you? His face reddened. There's no need to be rude. You just told me my entire adult life has been a waste, but I'm the one being rude. Got it. He opened his mouth, closed it, then walked away muttering something about typical Clarissa. I should have left then. Should have made my excuses, called an Uber, gone back to my hotel. But I stayed, because some self-destructive part of me needed to see how much worse it could get. Turns out, significantly worse. An hour later, Gregory decided to give a toast. This wasn't planned. Todd looked as surprised as anyone when Gregory clinked his glass and called for everyone's attention. But Gregory had been drinking steadily, and he had that particular glassy-eyed look that meant he was about to say something he thought was profound. I just want to say a few words, he began, swaying slightly, about family, about what it means to be a Radford. Quote, my mother looked nervous, Todd's wife looked confused. I felt a sense of impending doom. The Radfords are successful people, Gregory continued. We work hard. We achieve things. We make our mark on the world. Look at Todd, youngest senior salesman at Classic Motors. Look at Meredith, building a business from the ground up. Look at Richard. That was my cousin, a middle manager at a pharmaceutical company, moving up the corporate ladder. Oh no. And we support each other, even when, he paused for effect, even when some of us take a little longer to find our way. He was looking directly at me. Take Clarissa, for instance. He gestured at me with his champagne flute. Several dozen heads turned in my direction. She's been working at the supermarket for, 15 years now? My mother made a small noise of distress. That's not, she started, but Gregory rolled over her. She collects the shopping carts, pushes them around all day in the rain, and you know what? That's honest work, that's dignified work, nothing to be ashamed of. The fellowship hall had gone very quiet. I could feel 50 pairs of eyes on me. So let's raise a glass to Clarissa, Gregory said, his voice dripping with magnanimous condescension. For her perseverance, for her persistence, for showing us that not everyone needs to be a high achiever to be part of this family. A few uncomfortable laughs rippled through the crowd. Someone, I think it was one of Todd's in-laws, actually raised their glass. My mother looked like she wanted to dissolve into the floor. Todd was staring at his shoes. I stood there, holding my champagne, thinking about the 18-hour days, the missed holidays, the relationships that had dissolved because I couldn't explain where I'd been or why I'd had to cancel dinner at the last minute. I thought about the scars, literal physical scars, from a blown operation in Caracas 6 years ago. I thought about the commendation letter from the Director of Central Intelligence currently sitting in a locked safe in my apartment. And I thought, I should say something, I should correct this, I should end this farce right now. But I didn't, because some petty part of me wanted to see if it could get even worse. Wanted to see if they could actually be more condescending, more presumptuous, more deliberately blind. Gregory wasn't finished. And who knows, he said, warming to his theme, maybe one day Clarissa will find something better. Maybe she'll finally decide to get some training, go back to school, make something of herself. It's never too late. More uncomfortable laughter. My mother was whispering urgently to my father, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. I noticed Todd's wife leaning over to someone and whispering something. I could guess what. That's his sister, the one who works at the supermarket? I felt something crystallize inside me, not anger, exactly, something colder. A kind of perfect, clinical detachment, the same emotional distance I used during difficult operations. Fine, I thought. If this is who you are, then this is who you are. Gregory raised his glass higher. To family, to the Radfords, to all of us, in all our various capacities. People drank. The toast concluded. Conversation gradually resumed. Gregory looked pleased with himself, as if he'd done something magnanimous and kind. I stayed in my corner, eating cake, waiting. Waiting for what? I didn't know yet. But something, some cosmic justice perhaps, some narrative satisfaction. I didn't have to wait long. 15 minutes later, the fellowship hall doors opened. A man in a dark suit entered, not a church guest, clearly. He had that particular look, alert, professional, scanning the room with practiced efficiency. I recognized it immediately because I worked with people who looked exactly like that every single day. Security. Probably diplomatic security service, based on the subtle lapel pin and the specific way he moved through the room. My stomach dropped. No. The man made his way directly to Father Morrison, who was chatting with a group of parishioners near the altar. He leaned in, whispered something. I couldn't hear it from across the room, but I saw Father Morrison's expression change. Saw confusion, then something like alarm, then a kind of careful blankness. Father Morrison's eyes swept the room until they found me. Oh, God. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't protocol. I wasn't on protective detail. I wasn't meeting anyone. I was off duty, for Christ's sake. I was at a family christening eating cake and enduring condescension. There was no reason, no operational justification for. But Father Morrison was walking toward me now, the man in the suit a few steps behind. The crowd was parting, sensing something official, something important. Clarissa, Father Morrison's voice was careful. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Everyone was watching now. The entire fellowship hall had gone silent, all previous conversations dying mid-sentence. "Of course," I said quietly. Father Morrison glanced at the crowd, then back at me. His face had gone slightly pale. The man in the suit whispered something else to him, then turned and left as quickly as he'd arrived. Father Morrison looked at me, then at Gregory, then back at me. I apologize," he said, and his voice carried across the silent room. "I didn't realize. No one informed me that we had," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "that Agent Radford would be attending today." Agent. The word dropped into the silence, like a stone into still water. I closed my eyes, opened them. "It's fine, Father," I said quietly. "It's not your fault." "I should have been notified," he continued, and he seemed genuinely distressed. "There are protocols when someone of your clearance level attends a public event, even a private one. I should have been told. I am so terribly sorry for any." "Father," I said more firmly, "it's fine. I'm off duty. I wasn't expecting any accommodation." But the damage was done. Every single person in that fellowship hall was staring at me. My mother's mouth was literally hanging open. Todd had gone white. Gregory looked like someone had struck him in the face. And then Gregory, because of course it was Gregory, managed to speak. "Agent?" His voice cracked slightly. What does he mean, Agent?" I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. My operational security, my carefully maintained anonymity, my entire professional life had just been exposed in the worst possible way, in front of the last people I wanted to know. Father Morrison, bless him, seemed to realize he'd made some kind of mistake, but he didn't know what kind or how to fix it. He looked between me and Gregory helplessly. "Ms. Radford, Agent Radford, works for," he trailed off, uncertain. "The Central Intelligence Agency," I said flatly. There was no point in denying it now. "I'm a senior operations officer, have been for 17 years. The silence was absolute. My mother made a small, strangled sound. Gregory's champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. No one moved to clean it up. Todd's wife leaned over and whispered something to Todd. He shook his head, looking dazed. My father had his hand over his mouth, staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. And Gregory, who had just spent 5 minutes telling a room full of people that I pushed shopping carts, looked like he was going to be sick. "You," he started, then stopped. "The CIA?" "Yes, Greg. But you always said you did government work, administrative work." "I said I worked for the government. You decided what that meant." "But," he looked around wildly, as if someone might explain this to him, might make it make sense. "Shopping carts, you said?" "I never said that, Greg. You said that. Just now, in front of 50 people. The color drained from his face entirely. My mother found her voice. "Clarissa, why didn't you tell us?" I looked at her, really looked at her. "I did tell you, Mom, dozens of times. You didn't want to hear it." "But the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States government, yes. I've briefed the president, multiple presidents. I run operations in South America. I manage a team of field officers. I have security clearances that most people don't know exist." More silence. Todd's father-in-law was staring at me with his mouth open. The country club friends looked stunned. Meredith, the Instagram leggings entrepreneur, had actually taken out her phone and appeared to be Googling me. Good luck with that. My name doesn't appear in search results. Gregory tried again. His face was red now, splotchy with embarrassment and alcohol. You should have. Why didn't you?" "Correct you," I finished. "I tried, Greg. But you were all so convinced of your own narrative, so absolutely certain that you understood my life better than I did, that it seemed easier to just let you believe what you wanted to believe." "But shopping carts," he whispered. The words seemed to be stuck in his mind, a record skipping. "I told everyone." "Yes," I said quietly, "you did." Father Morrison, still looking distressed, cleared his throat. Again, I am so terribly sorry for any disruption. I should have been notified. There should have been proper protocol. Father, I said gently, this isn't your fault. You did nothing wrong. But we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Someone in DSS had been doing their job, checking attendance at public events, flagging anyone with high-level clearance, ensuring proper security protocols. It was standard procedure. They'd had no way of knowing they were about to detonate a family gathering. The silence stretched. Somewhere in the back of the hall, a baby started crying, probably Christopher, sensing the tension. My mother seemed to be processing things at the speed of continental drift. So when you said you were traveling for work, I was traveling for work, I confirmed. Istanbul, Bogota, Mexico City, anywhere the agency needs me. And the paperwork you mentioned. Intelligence reports, briefing documents, classified materials. And you can't tell us about your work because it's classified at the highest levels of government, Mom. Because lives depend on secrecy. Because that's what intelligence officer means. Todd finally spoke. His voice was quiet, almost childlike. You're like a spy? I'm an operations officer. It's not as glamorous as the movies, but yes. Essentially. He sat down heavily in the nearest chair. His wife sat down next to him, looking dazed. Gregory had still not moved. The champagne was pooling around his expensive shoes, but he didn't seem to notice. He was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite parse. Horror, shame, disbelief, all mixed together. I should go, I said finally. The energy in the room had become unbearable. Congratulations on the christening. Christopher is beautiful. I started toward the door. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea, everyone stepping back to give me space. It was almost comical. 10 minutes ago I'd been the family embarrassment. Now I was apparently radioactive. Clarissa, wait. My mother's voice. I turned. She looked lost. I don't understand why you didn't tell us. I did tell you, I said again. You didn't want to hear it. It didn't fit the story you'd already written about who I was supposed to be. But we're your family. Yes, I said, you are. I left that statement hanging, unfinished. Let them interpret it however they wanted. I walked out of the fellowship hall, out of St. Margaret's Episcopal Church, into the cool November afternoon. My hands were shaking, not from anger or embarrassment, but from sheer adrenaline dump. My cover, not an operational cover, but my personal cover, the anonymity I'd wrapped around myself like armor, was gone. My phone was already ringing, my supervisor. Damage control would be swift and thorough. There would be meetings, paperwork, probably a formal review of what had happened and why. DSS would be mortified that they'd accidentally exposed an operations officer to their own family. But as I stood there in the church parking lot, watching autumn leaves skitter across the asphalt, I felt something unexpected. Relief. The weight of their condescension, their dismissal, their persistent, willful ignorance, it was gone. I didn't have to carry it anymore. Whatever happened next with my family, whether they apologized, whether they tried to understand, whether they could even process what they'd learned, it was no longer my problem to manage. I'd spent 17 years protecting secrets that could reshape international relations. I'd managed assets, run operations, made decisions that affected thousands of lives. And I'd let my own uncle tell a room full of people that I pushed shopping carts in the rain. The absurdity of it finally hit me, and I started to laugh. Not bitterness, just pure, exhausted amusement at the complete ridiculousness of my life. A car pulled up, my supervisor, almost certainly here to begin the cleanup. Time to be a professional again. But for just one more moment, I stood in that parking lot and laughed at the memory of Gregory's face when Father Morrison said, "Agent." The look of a man watching his entire worldview shatter in real time. It was, I had to admit, pretty satisfying.